Daughter offers herself as collateral to billionaire's son for father's gambling debt. Some debts can only be paid with a lifetime, and today, Sage Bennett was about to discover just how much her life was worth to a man who could buy anything except what he truly needed. The glass towers of downtown pierced the gray morning sky like crystalline needles, each floor representing more wealth than Sage had ever imagined. But as she stood in the marble lobby of Maguire Financial, clutching a worn manila envelope against her chest, wealth was the furthest thing from her mind. Her father's debt notice crinkled beneath her trembling fingers, $2.3 million that might as well have been $200 million for all their ability to pay it. Just 48 hours ago, her world had shattered with 4 devastating words from her father's lips: "I lost everything, sweetheart." Thomas Bennett, the gentle man who had raised her alone after her mother's death, had confessed through tears that seemed to pour from his very soul. What had started as occasional poker games to escape his grief 3 years ago had spiraled into a dangerous addiction, leading him straight into the web of Edmund Maguire's ruthless collection agency. "The house, Sage," he had whispered, his weathered hands shaking as badly as his voice. "Our home, your mother's garden, every memory we've built together. I gambled it all away in one terrible night of weakness." Now, as the elevator climbed toward the 47th floor, Sage's reflection stared back at her from the polished steel walls. She had chosen her outfit carefully this morning, a simple navy dress that had been her mother's, paired with the only decent shoes she owned. The expensive cologne lingering in the elevator reminded her that she was entering a world where people like her simply didn't belong, but she squared her shoulders anyway. Sage Bennett had never been one to back down from a fight, especially when someone she loved was in danger. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a reception area that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across cream-colored walls, while fresh orchids in crystal vases filled the air with their delicate perfume. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a woman whose makeup was applied with surgical precision, her professional smile as polished as the marble beneath Sage's feet. "Miss Bennett?" The receptionist's voice carried the perfect balance of professional warmth and subtle distance. "Mr. Maguire is ready for you." Sage nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she caught her first glimpse of Nathaniel Maguire's corner office. She had prepared herself to face a monster, someone cold and calculating who could destroy lives with casual indifference. Instead, she saw a man in his early 30s bent over documents, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it in frustration. Even from this distance, she could see the tension radiating from his shoulders, the way he gripped his pen with white-knuckled intensity. This wasn't the heartless destroyer she had imagined. He looked burdened. Human. The receptionist pressed a button, and moments later, the office door opened. Nathaniel Maguire stepped into the doorway, and Sage felt something shift in the air around them. Tall and lean, with the kind of presence that drew attention like gravity, he moved with the controlled grace of someone who had learned early that power required perfect composure. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard, deep brown and sharp with intelligence. They held a weariness that seemed to mirror her own exhaustion. "Miss Bennett." His voice was rich and controlled, revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Please, come in." As she walked past him into the office, she caught a whisper of his cologne, something expensive and understated that spoke of quiet confidence rather than flashy wealth. The office itself told a story of refined taste, rich leather chairs arranged around a glass conference table, walls lined with first-edition books that looked actually read, and artwork that seemed chosen for beauty rather than investment value. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, making her feel as if she were standing at the edge of the world. But it was Nathaniel himself who commanded her attention. As he closed the door behind them, she noticed how his perfectly tailored suit couldn't quite hide the tension in his frame, the careful way he moved to maintain distance between them, and the almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes when he looked at the debt papers in her hand. "Please, have a seat." He gestured toward one of the leather chairs. Sage remained standing. If she was going to change the course of her life in this room, she would do it on her feet, with whatever dignity she had left intact. I prefer to stand, thank you. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps even respect. Very well. I assume you're here about your father's debt. I am. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. I'm here to offer myself as collateral. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge thrown down at his feet. For a moment, Nathaniel Maguire's carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw and unguarded beneath. His pen stilled in his hand, and she watched as his gaze searched her face, looking for something she couldn't name. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You heard me correctly. Sage's voice was steady despite the storm raging in her chest. My father owes you $2.3 million. I'm here to offer myself as collateral for that debt. She reached into her envelope and placed the debt documents on his desk, her fingers brushing against his as he reached for them. The contact was brief, electric, sending an unexpected jolt through her entire body. From the way his hand stilled, she knew he had felt it too. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. Nathaniel's eyes moved from the documents to her face, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the cool air conditioning. Miss Bennet, I'm not entirely certain you understand what you're proposing. I understand perfectly. She forced herself to maintain eye contact, even though his gaze seemed to see straight through to her soul. I'm proposing that instead of pursuing legal action against my father, you accept me as payment for his debt. And what exactly would that entail? The question was asked quietly, but she heard the underlying tension in his voice. For the first time since entering his office, she felt a flutter of uncertainty. She had expected him to jump at the offer, to see her as just another acquisition for his collection. Instead, he seemed almost disturbed by the suggestion. Whatever you require, she said, the words tasting like ashes in her mouth. I have a teaching degree, experience in art therapy. I can work, I can. She faltered, realizing how naive she must sound. You can what, Miss Bennet? His voice was soft, but there was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. You walk into my office and offer yourself as collateral, but you haven't actually thought through what that means, have you? Heat flooded her cheeks, but she refused to back down. I know what it means. It means my father doesn't go to prison. It means our family home stays in our family. It means I do whatever it takes to protect the man who sacrificed everything to raise me. Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression. The careful distance he maintained wavered for just a moment, and she glimpsed something vulnerable underneath, a recognition, perhaps, of the kind of loyalty that drove someone to make impossible choices. Your father raised you alone? The question was unexpected, more personal than she had prepared for. After my mother died, yes. I see. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her face. And you're willing to sacrifice your freedom for his? Freedom is overrated when the people you love are suffering. The words escaped before she could stop them, and she watched as they hit their mark. Nathaniel's carefully controlled mask slipped another degree, revealing something raw and achingly familiar. For a moment, she felt as if she were looking into a mirror, another person trapped by circumstances, making impossible choices for the people they loved. Miss Bennet, he said finally, his voice rougher than before. I think you and I need to have a very different conversation than the one you came here to have. He stood up, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the tension that held his jaw rigid, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as if he were fighting some internal battle. What kind of conversation? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The kind where I tell you that I never wanted to be in the debt collection business. The kind where I admit that every file that crosses my desk makes me feel like I'm selling pieces of my soul. He paused, his gaze dropping to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. The kind where I confess that I've been looking for a way out of this business for years, but haven't had the courage to disappoint my father. The honesty in his voice stole her breath. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she had expected. This was a man as trapped as she was, making impossible choices in an impossible situation. Then why do you do it? She asked. The same reason you're standing in my office offering yourself as collateral, he said quietly. Because sometimes love requires us to become people we never wanted to be. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Two strangers, brought together by circumstances neither had chosen, recognizing something in each other that they had never expected to find. Have you ever faced a moment where protecting someone you love meant sacrificing everything you thought you wanted for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Chapter 2. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and unspoken understanding. Nathaniel moved behind his desk, but instead of sitting, he stood with his hands braced against the glass surface, staring down at the debt papers as if they held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. Miss Bennet, he said finally, his voice careful and measured. What you're proposing isn't how my family's business typically operates. And how does your family's business typically operate? The question escaped before Sage could stop it, edged with more defiance than she had intended. Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or regret. Efficiently. Ruthlessly. Without concern for the human cost. He looked up at her, and she was startled by the honesty she saw there. My father believes that debt collection is about power, about demonstrating consequences. I've spent years trying to find more humane alternatives. But you haven't found any? I haven't had the courage to implement any. The admission seemed to cost him something. Until now, perhaps. Nathaniel straightened, decision crystallizing in his expression. I have a proposition for you, Miss Bennet. Not the arrangement you came here expecting, but something that might serve both our needs. Sage's heart hammered against her ribs. What kind of proposition? Instead of traditional collateral, you would work for me. As my personal assistant. The position would come with a substantial salary, enough to make significant payments toward your father's debt. 1 year of employment would clear the obligation entirely. She stared at him, searching his face for the catch she knew had to be there. Your personal assistant? I travel frequently for business. I attend social functions that require a companion. I need someone who can handle confidential matters with discretion. He paused, his gaze holding hers steadily. Someone I can trust. And why would you trust me? Because you just walked into my office and offered to sacrifice your freedom for someone you love. That kind of loyalty can't be bought, Miss Bennet. It can only be earned. The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were kind. She had prepared herself for exploitation, for degradation, for becoming nothing more than property to be used. She had not prepared herself for respect. What would this arrangement entail exactly? You would live in the guest wing of my penthouse. Attend business functions as my companion when required. Handle my personal schedule, correspondence, travel arrangements. Nothing that would compromise your integrity or dignity. Sage felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. And my father's debt? Would be considered paid in full at the end of 1 year, regardless of the actual monetary amount earned. Nathaniel's voice was steady, but she caught the slight tension in his jaw. My father need never know the specific terms of our arrangement. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do this? For a moment, Nathaniel's carefully controlled mask slipped entirely, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. Because I understand what it means to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control. Because I've spent my entire life watching my father destroy families for the sake of profit, and I'm tired of being complicit in that destruction. He paused, his voice dropping lower. And because something about your courage in walking through that door today tells me that you might be exactly what I need to finally find the strength to become the man I want to be instead of the one my father expects me to be. The honesty in his words stole her breath. This wasn't the cold transaction she had anticipated. This was something far more dangerous, an offer wrapped in kindness, presented by a man whose own pain seemed to mirror her own. I need time to think, she managed. Of course. But Miss Bennet? He moved around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her again, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Whatever you decide, your father's debt will not result in criminal prosecution. You have my word on that. She searched his face, looking for deception and finding none. Why should I trust your word? Because unlike my father, I still remember what it feels like to lose someone you love. I won't be responsible for taking your father away from you. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tight. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. The contact sent electricity shooting through her entire body, and from the way his breath caught, she knew he felt it too. I'll need to discuss this with my father, she said, her voice barely steady. Of course. But he didn't step away from her touch, and she didn't remove her hand. For a moment, they stood frozen in that connection, both afraid to move and break whatever fragile understanding had formed between them. Finally, Sage forced herself to step back, immediately missing the warmth of the contact. How do I reach you with my decision? Nathaniel pulled a business card from his pocket, but instead of handing it to her, he moved to his desk and wrote something on the back. My private number, he said, offering her the card. This time, when their fingers brushed, neither of them pulled away immediately. Call me when you're ready. 2 days later, Sage stood in the same elevator, rising toward the same floor, but everything had changed. The conversation with her father had been devastating and enlightening in equal measure. Thomas Bennet, despite his shame and self-recrimination, had seen something in her description of Nathaniel Maguire that gave him hope. He could have demanded immediate payment, her father had said, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. He could have had me arrested. The fact that he offered you genuine employment instead of other arrangements tells me something about his character. But Papa, what if I'm wrong about him? What if this is just a more sophisticated trap? Thomas had looked at his daughter with eyes that held decades of hard-won wisdom. Sweetheart, sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. This man is offering you a chance to save our family while keeping your dignity intact. That's more hope than we had yesterday. Now, as the elevator doors opened onto the familiar reception area, Sage felt a strange sense of déjà vu mixed with anticipation. The same receptionist offered the same polished smile, but this time, Sage was expected. This time, she belonged here. Nathaniel's office door was open, and she could see him standing by the windows, silhouetted against the afternoon sky. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her, relief, perhaps, or something deeper that made her pulse quicken. Miss Bennet. His voice was warm this time, genuinely pleased. I was hoping you would come. I accept your offer, she said without preamble. With conditions. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. I'm listening. I continue my work at the community center. My art therapy classes are important to me, and to the children I teach. Agreed. I want a written contract that clearly outlines the terms of our arrangement. No ambiguity, no hidden clauses. My lawyer will have it prepared by tomorrow. And I want to meet with your father. The smile faded from Nathaniel's face. Miss Bennet, I don't think that's wise. Mr. Maguire, if I'm going to be living in your home and working as your assistant, Edmund Maguire is going to know about it. I'd rather face whatever judgment he has for me directly than live in fear of his disapproval. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, and she saw the exact instant when respect deepened into something else, something that made her skin warm and her breath catch. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would need protecting. Someone fragile." He moved closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "I'm beginning to realize that you're the strongest person I've ever met." The compliment hit her like a physical caress, warming places in her heart that had been cold for too long. "I'm not strong, Mr. Maguire. I'm just desperate enough to be brave." "Nathaniel," he said softly. "If we're going to be working together, you should call me Nathaniel." Nathaniel. His name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her pulse flutter. "And what should I call you?" "Miss Bennet seems rather formal for someone who's about to become part of my daily life." "Sage." The word came out breathier than she intended. "My name is Sage." "Sage." He repeated her name like he was tasting something sweet. "It suits you. Wise, grounded, beautiful." The compliment made heat flood her cheeks, but she forced herself to maintain composure. "When do we start?" "Tonight, if you're willing. I have a charity gala tomorrow evening. The kind of event where I need a companion who can hold her own in conversation with donors and board members." He paused, his gaze becoming more intense. "It would be a trial by fire, but it would also establish you as part of my world from the beginning." Sage thought of her small apartment, her father's worried face, the mounting bills that kept her awake at night. Then she looked at Nathaniel, really looked at him, and saw not just salvation for her family, but something else entirely. A man who was choosing kindness when cruelty would have been easier. A man whose own pain made him gentle with hers. "I'll need something to wear," she said. "Already arranged. My stylist will meet you at Bergdorf's this afternoon. Whatever you need, whatever makes you feel confident and comfortable." "You were that certain I would say yes?" "I was hopeful." His voice dropped to something that felt like silk against her skin. "I was also terrified you would say no." The honesty in his admission made something shift inside her chest, a wall cracking that she hadn't even realized she'd built. "Why terrified?" "Because in 2 days, you've given me more hope than I've felt in years. The thought of going back to the life I was living before you walked through that door." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I couldn't bear it." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with implication and possibility. Sage felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, one step away from falling into something that would change her forever. "Nathaniel," she said carefully, "what exactly are we doing here?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching her face as if he were memorizing every detail. "I think," he said finally, "we're saving each other." Before either of them could analyze the implications of that statement, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The spell broke, and they both stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing, how intimate the conversation had become. "That will be my father," Nathaniel said, glancing at the caller ID with obvious reluctance. "He wants to meet with me about your father's account." "Should I go?" "No." The word came out sharper than he intended, and he softened his tone. "Stay. Please. If we're going to do this, we should face him together." Sage nodded, her heart hammering as Nathaniel answered the call and put it on speaker. "Nathaniel." Edmund Maguire's voice filled the office, cold and commanding even through the phone. "I understand you've been meeting with Thomas Bennet's daughter." "I have, father. We've reached an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Nathaniel's gaze found Sage's, and she saw him steel himself for battle. "Miss Bennet will be working as my personal assistant for 1 year." Her salary and benefits will cover the debt in full. The silence on the other end of the line was deadly. When Edmund finally spoke, his voice was ice. I see. And you made this decision without consulting me? The debt collection division falls under my purview, Father. As does my personal staff. Your personal staff doesn't typically live in your penthouse, Nathaniel. So he already knew. Sage felt her stomach drop, but Nathaniel's expression remained steady. Miss Bennet's living arrangements are necessary for the scope of her responsibilities. I travel frequently, and I need an assistant who can be available at all hours. I want to meet her. That can be arranged. Tonight. Dinner. 8 o'clock. It wasn't a request, and they all knew it. Sage felt panic flutter in her chest, but when she looked at Nathaniel, his expression was calm and determined. We'll be there, he said. See that you are. The line went dead, leaving them in heavy silence. Sage sank into one of the leather chairs, the weight of what she had agreed to finally hitting her. Second thoughts? Nathaniel asked gently. She looked up at him, this man who was offering her salvation wrapped in kindness, and made her choice. No, she said firmly. No second thoughts. If we're going to save each other, we might as well start tonight. Chapter 3. The penthouse guest wing was a study in understated elegance that made Sage feel like she was living inside a magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights, while cream-colored furniture and soft lighting created an atmosphere of serene luxury. But as she stood in front of the full-length mirror that evening, adjusting the elegant navy gown that Nathaniel's stylist had selected, luxury was the furthest thing from her mind. Tonight, she would meet Edmund Maguire. Tonight, she would step into Nathaniel's world as his companion, not his employee. Tonight, everything would change. The gown fit her perfectly, flowing over her curves like liquid silk and making her feel beautiful in a way she hadn't experienced since her mother's death. The stylist had chosen jewelry that was elegant but not ostentatious. Pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother and a simple gold bracelet that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was swept into a sophisticated updo that revealed the graceful line of her neck, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. She looked like she belonged in Nathaniel's world. The question was whether she could feel like she belonged there too. A soft knock on her door interrupted her nervous preparations. Sage? Are you ready? Nathaniel's voice sent butterflies dancing through her stomach. Just a moment, she called, taking one last look at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was confident, poised, and beautiful. She barely recognized herself. When she opened the door, Nathaniel's reaction made every moment of preparation worthwhile. He stood frozen in the hallway, his lips parted slightly, his dark eyes moving over her with an appreciation so profound it made her skin warm from head to toe. You look. He trailed off, seeming to search for words. Sage, you're absolutely stunning. The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. Nathaniel himself was devastating in his black tuxedo, every line tailored to perfection, his dark hair styled with casual elegance. But it was the way he was looking at her, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, that made her pulse race. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. You clean up pretty well yourself. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Shall we? My driver is waiting, and we have a dinner to survive. The word survive was more accurate than either of them wanted to admit. Edmund Maguire's private dining room at the exclusive Metropolitan Club was designed to intimidate, with dark wood paneling, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings of stern-faced men who seemed to judge everyone who entered. When they arrived, Edmund was already seated at the head of a table that could have accommodated 20 people but was set for only 3. If Nathaniel was handsome, Edmund Maguire was formidable. Silver-haired and impeccably dressed, he carried himself with the kind of authority that came from decades of wielding absolute power. His pale blue eyes missed nothing as they assessed Sage from head to toe, and his smile when he stood to greet them was as cold as winter morning. "Miss Bennet." His voice was cultured, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. "How lovely to finally meet you. Mr. Maguire." Sage extended her hand, grateful that it wasn't trembling. "Thank you for inviting me to dinner." Edmund's handshake lingered a moment longer than necessary, his eyes never leaving her face. "Please, sit. I'm eager to learn more about the woman who has so captured my son's attention." The way he said "captured" made it sound like a disease, but Sage kept her expression neutral as Nathaniel pulled out her chair. She could feel the tension radiating from him as he took his own seat, and when his hand briefly touched her shoulder, she drew strength from the contact. "Tell me, Miss Bennet," Edmund said as the first course was served, "what exactly qualifies you to be my son's personal assistant?" "I have a degree in education with a specialization in art therapy," Sage replied calmly. "I've been teaching for 6 years, which has given me experience in organization, communication, and working with diverse groups of people." "Art therapy." Edmund's tone suggested he found the concept amusing. "And you believe that qualifies you to move in the circles my son frequents? To represent the Maguire name at social and business functions?" Sage felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Nathaniel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Sage's qualifications are more than adequate, father. Her intelligence, grace, and integrity are exactly what I need in an assistant." "Integrity." Edmund's laugh was cold. "How refreshing. Tell me, Miss Bennet, what does your integrity say about accepting employment from the man who holds your father's debt?" The question was designed to wound, to make her feel small and opportunistic. For a moment, Sage felt the familiar shame that had plagued her since learning about her father's addiction. But then she looked at Nathaniel and saw something in his expression that gave her courage, not pity, but admiration for her strength. "My integrity tells me that protecting the people I love is worth any sacrifice," she said quietly. "It also tells me that your son offered me a position of dignity and respect when he could have demanded something far different. That speaks to his character, not mine." Something flickered in Edmund's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. "You have spirit. I'll give you that." "She has more than spirit," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying a warning edge. "She has courage, intelligence, and a strength of character that's rare in any circle." The pride in his voice made Sage's heart skip, but Edmund's expression hardened. "Strength of character doesn't pay debts, Nathaniel. Neither does sentiment." "No," Nathaniel agreed, his gaze never leaving his father's face. "But it creates something far more valuable than money. It creates loyalty that can't be bought, trust that can't be manufactured, and connections that last a lifetime." "Pretty words," Edmund said dismissively. "But business is built on results, not poetry." "Then let me give you results," Sage interjected, surprising both men. "Your son's charity work has raised over $50 million for children's education in the past 5 years. His ethical investment initiatives have generated returns that exceed industry standards while supporting sustainable businesses. He's built partnerships based on trust and mutual respect rather than fear and intimidation." She paused, meeting Edmund's gaze directly. "Perhaps the question isn't whether I'm qualified to represent the Maguire name, but whether the Maguire name is worthy of someone like your son." The silence that followed was deafening. Edmund's face had gone completely still, and Sage wondered if she had just destroyed everything before it had even begun. But when she glanced at Nathaniel, his expression was one of pure admiration mixed with something deeper, something that made her pulse race and her skin warm. Finally, Edmund began to laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor, cold and calculating, but not entirely without appreciation. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Bennet. I prefer to think of it as being very honest, Mr. Maguire." "Indeed." Edmund's gaze moved between his son and Sage, and she could practically see him recalculating his strategy. Well, this should prove interesting. The rest of the dinner passed in relative peace, with Edmund asking pointed questions about Sage's background and plans while she answered with quiet dignity. Nathaniel remained alert beside her, ready to defend her if necessary, but she handled herself with such grace that his intervention wasn't needed. It wasn't until they were leaving the club that Edmund delivered his final blow. "Nathaniel," he said as they waited for the car. "I trust you understand that this arrangement is temporary. Miss Bennet seems lovely, but let's not confuse business with pleasure. The only confusion here, Father, is your assumption that you have any say in my personal life." Edmund's smile was razor-sharp. "Everything is personal when it affects the family business. Don't forget that." The drive back to the penthouse was quiet, both of them processing the evening's events. Sage stared out the window at the city lights, replaying every moment of dinner and wondering if she had made things better or worse for Nathaniel. "You were magnificent," Nathaniel said suddenly, his voice warm with admiration. "I probably shouldn't have said what I did about the Maguire name. That was the most honest thing anyone has said to my father in years. He needed to hear it." Sage turned to look at him, struck by the intensity in his expression. "Are you going to pay a price for tonight?" "Probably." He reached over and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "But it was worth it to see you hold your own against one of the most intimidating men in the city." His touch sent electricity shooting through her entire body, and when he lifted their joined hands to press a gentle kiss to her knuckles, she thought her heart might stop entirely. "Sage," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being exactly who you are. For not letting him diminish you. For—" He paused, his thumb tracing gentle circles across her skin. "For making me remember what it feels like to be proud of something other than profit margins." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. Without thinking, she reached up with her free hand and touched his cheek, feeling the slight roughness of his evening shadow beneath her palm. "Nathaniel," she whispered. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a moment as if he were savoring the contact. When he opened them again, the intensity she saw there stole her breath. "We should go upstairs," he said, but he made no move to release her hand or pull away from her touch. "We should," she agreed, but neither of them moved. The space between them seemed to shimmer with possibility, heavy with attraction and the weight of everything unspoken. Sage was acutely aware of his warmth, his subtle cologne, the way his breath had quickened to match her own. "This is complicated," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, his voice barely audible. "It is." But complicated didn't stop him from leaning closer, and it didn't stop her from meeting him halfway. When his lips touched hers, soft and questioning, the world around them disappeared entirely. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of crossing a line they couldn't uncross. But when Sage's lips parted under his with a soft sigh, gentleness gave way to something deeper, more desperate. His hand cupped the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her carefully styled hair, while her palm flattened against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together in the intimate darkness of the car. "Sage," Nathaniel whispered, her name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "I know," she whispered back, because she did know. She knew that everything had just changed between them. She knew that what had started as a business arrangement had become something else entirely. And she knew that despite every logical reason to be careful, she was falling for a man whose world was so different from hers that it might as well be another planet. The car pulled up to the penthouse building, and reality came crashing back. Nathaniel's hand was still cupped around her neck, his thumb tracing gentle patterns across her skin that made her want to forget every practical consideration and lose herself in the promise she saw in his eyes. "We should talk about this," he said softly. "Tomorrow," she agreed, because tonight had already been overwhelming enough, and she needed time to process what she was feeling. Tomorrow, he confirmed, but he pressed one more soft kiss to her lips before helping her out of the car. As they rode the elevator up to the penthouse in charged silence, Sage caught their reflection in the polished steel doors. They looked like they belonged together, elegant, sophisticated, perfectly matched. The question was whether the reflection showed the truth or just a beautiful illusion. Have you ever felt that moment when everything shifts between two people, when friendship becomes something deeper and more dangerous? Share about a time when one kiss changed everything for you. The elevator doors opened onto Nathaniel's private foyer, and they walked toward their respective spaces with careful distance between them. But at the entrance to the guest wing, Nathaniel caught her hand one more time. "Sage," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever complications we're facing, I want you to know, tonight was the first time in years that I felt like myself instead of just Edmund Maguire's son." The raw vulnerability in his admission made her heart ache with tenderness. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, breathing in his warmth and strength. "Then maybe we're both becoming who we're supposed to be," she whispered against his skin. When she finally closed the door to her room and leaned against it, her heart was still racing and her lips still tingled from his kisses. Outside her windows, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds, and for the first time since her father's confession, Sage felt something that might have been hope. Tomorrow would bring the charity gala, where she would have to navigate Nathaniel's world as his companion rather than his employee. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and complications she couldn't even imagine yet. But tonight, she had been kissed by a man who saw her as beautiful and strong and worthy of respect. Tonight, she had stood up to one of the most powerful men in the city and emerged with her dignity intact. Tonight, she had glimpsed the possibility of a love that could transform them both. As she carefully hung up the beautiful gown and prepared for bed, Sage couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken another irrevocable turn. The question was whether she was brave enough to see where this new path would lead. In the master suite across the penthouse, Nathaniel stood at his own windows, his bow tie undone and his shirt partially unbuttoned, staring out at the city lights and thinking about the taste of Sage's lips and the way she had defended him to his father with fierce loyalty. For the first time in his life, he had met someone who challenged him to be better while accepting him exactly as he was. Tomorrow, he would take her to the charity gala. Tomorrow, he would introduce her to his world as his companion, knowing that every eye would be on them, every tongue would be wagging with speculation. Tomorrow, he would have to navigate the dangerous waters between business and pleasure, between duty to his family and loyalty to his own heart. But tonight, he allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to build a life with someone who saw him as more than just a bank account or a business opportunity. Tonight, he let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, two people from different worlds could find a way to create something beautiful together. The charity gala would be their first real test, a public debut that would either cement their partnership or expose the fundamental differences that might tear them apart. Either way, there would be no going back after tomorrow night. As Nathaniel finally prepared for bed, his last conscious thought was of Sage's smile and the way she had looked at him like he was capable of being the man he had always wanted to be but never had the courage to become. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, for the first time in years, Nathaniel Maguire fell asleep believing in the possibility of love. Chapter 4. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel had been transformed into a glittering wonderland of crystal, gold, and soft amber lighting. 500 of the city's most influential people mingled beneath soaring ceilings adorned with cascading flowers, their conversations creating a symphony of wealth and power that Sage had only ever imagined. Champagne flutes caught the light like liquid starlight, while designer gowns swept across marble floors in a parade of elegance that took her breath away. But as she stood at Nathaniel's side near the entrance, greeting guests and accepting introductions, Sage felt surprisingly at ease. The emerald green gown Nathaniel's stylist had selected made her feel like a goddess. Silk that flowed like water over her curves, with a neckline that was elegant without being revealing and a color that made her skin glow. Her jewelry was simple but exquisite, diamond earrings that caught the light when she moved and a delicate tennis bracelet that had belonged to Nathaniel's grandmother. "You're a natural at this," Nathaniel murmured in her ear as they moved between conversations, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. The warmth of his touch sent shivers through her entire body, and she was acutely aware of how perfectly they moved together, as if they had been attending events like this for years. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly, smiling graciously at a passing couple. "You don't show it. You look like you belong here." "Do I?" She glanced up at him, struck again by how devastatingly handsome he looked in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. But more than his appearance, it was the way he looked at her. With pride and admiration and something deeper that made her pulse race, that gave her confidence. "More than anyone else in this room," he said softly, his fingers tracing gentle patterns against her back through the silk of her dress. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Alex Anderson, Nathaniel's trusted assistant and friend. Tall and athletic with kind eyes and an easy smile, Alex had the gift of making everyone feel comfortable, and Sage had liked him immediately when they'd been introduced earlier that week. "Nate," Alex said, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "Great turnout tonight." "And Sage," he turned to her with a warm smile, "you look absolutely stunning. No wonder my friend here has been walking around with a permanent smile lately." Sage felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you, Alex. The venue is incredible. Wait until you see the auction items." Nate managed to secure some truly impressive donations this year. Alex's expression grew more serious. "Including a week at a private villa in Tuscany that I happen to know he was planning to use for his own vacation." "You donated your vacation?" Sage looked at Nathaniel in surprise. "It's for a good cause," he said, looking slightly embarrassed by the attention. "The children's literacy program needs funding more than I need a holiday." The casual way he had sacrificed something he wanted for the benefit of others made Sage's heart skip. This was the man his father thought was too soft for business, a man whose generosity and compassion were seen as weaknesses rather than strengths. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator's voice carried across the ballroom. "We'll be starting our program in 10 minutes. Please make your way to your tables." As they walked toward their table near the front of the room, Sage became aware of the attention they were attracting. Conversations quieted as they passed, and she caught fragments of whispered speculation about Nathaniel's mysterious companion. Some looks were curious, others envious, and a few held the kind of calculating assessment that made her skin crawl. "They're staring," she murmured to Nathaniel. "Let them stare," he replied, his voice carrying a note of possession that made her pulse quicken. "They're wondering how I was lucky enough to have the most beautiful woman in the room on my arm." His words were like warm honey, sweet and golden, making her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. When he pulled out her chair and his fingers brushed against her shoulders as she sat down, she had to resist the urge to lean into his touch. Their table companions were a carefully curated mix of donors, board members, and influential couples who wielded significant social and financial power. Sage found herself seated next to Margaret Whitfield, a silver-haired philanthropist whose family foundation had supported children's causes for 3 generations. "Miss Bennet," Margaret said warmly as the first course was served. "Nathaniel tells me you work in art therapy with children. How wonderful. I've always believed that creativity is essential for healing." "It really is," Sage replied, grateful for a topic she could discuss with genuine passion. "I've seen children who couldn't express their trauma through words create entire worlds of healing through art. There's something magical about giving someone a paintbrush and permission to be honest about their pain." "How beautifully put," Margaret smiled. "And where do you practice?" "At the Riverside Community Center. We serve children from low-income families who've experienced various forms of trauma, abuse, neglect, homelessness, family addiction issues." Nathaniel's hand found hers under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture of support and connection. The simple contact sent warmth shooting through her entire body, and when she glanced at him, the pride in his expression made her feel like she could conquer the world. "That must be emotionally challenging work," commented Dr. Harrison, a prominent psychiatrist seated across from them. "It is," Sage admitted. "But it's also incredibly rewarding. These children have such resilience and creativity. They just need someone to believe in their potential and give them tools to express themselves safely." "Sage is being modest," Nathaniel interjected, his thumb tracing gentle patterns across her knuckles. "Her program has one of the highest success rates in the city for helping children develop healthy coping mechanisms. She's created something truly special." The way he spoke about her work, with genuine respect and admiration, made Sage's chest tight with emotion. No one had ever made her feel like her career was not just meaningful but impressive. With Nathaniel, she felt valued for her intelligence and passion, not pitted for her circumstances. "How did you two meet?" asked Jennifer Morrison, a socialite whose curiosity was thinly veiled as polite interest. Sage felt Nathaniel's hand tighten around hers, and she could sense him preparing to field the question diplomatically. But something about the woman's tone, calculating and slightly condescending, made Sage decide to answer honestly. "Through a business matter involving my family," she said calmly. Nathaniel showed incredible kindness and integrity in a difficult situation. "I was impressed by his character long before I was charmed by his company." It was the truth, carefully presented, and it had the added benefit of making Nathaniel look good while deflecting further prying. She felt his thumb trace a gentle caress across her skin, a silent thank you for handling the question with such grace. The evening progressed through speeches, auction presentations, and entertainment, but Sage found herself increasingly aware of the man beside her. The way he leaned closer when she spoke, bringing the subtle scent of his cologne with him. The way his fingers played with hers under the table, sending little sparks of electricity through her entire body. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, with an intensity that made her feel like the only woman in the room. When the dancing began, Nathaniel stood and offered her his hand with old-fashioned gallantry. "Would you do me the honor?" The dance floor was already crowded with couples swaying to the orchestra's romantic melody, but when Nathaniel took her in his arms, the rest of the world faded away. His hand settled at her waist with perfect confidence, while his other hand held hers with gentle firmness. They moved together as if they had been dancing for years, her body instinctively following his lead. "You're full of surprises," she murmured as he spun her gracefully before bringing her back against his chest. "What do you mean? I didn't know you could dance like this." "My mother insisted on lessons when I was young," he said, his voice growing softer at the mention of his mother. "She said a gentleman should always be able to make a lady feel graceful and beautiful on a dance floor. She sounds like she was a wonderful woman." She was. His grip on her waist tightened slightly, pulling her closer until she could feel the warmth of his body through their clothes. "She would have liked you. You have her strength and her grace." The compliment made her heart skip, but it was the vulnerability in his voice that made her chest tight with emotion. As they swayed together, she found herself studying his face, the strong line of his jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes, the way his lips curved when he smiled. He was devastatingly handsome, but it was the kindness she saw in his expression that truly took her breath away. "Nathaniel," she said softly, and something in her tone made him look down at her with questioning eyes. "What is it?" Before she could answer, his expression suddenly shifted, his body tensing against hers. Following his gaze, Sage saw a striking woman approaching them across the dance floor. Tall and elegant with platinum blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, she moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was beautiful and powerful. Her silver gown was a masterpiece of designer craftsmanship, and the diamonds at her throat probably cost more than Sage's annual salary. "Nathaniel," the woman said as she reached them, her voice carrying the cultured tones of old money and private schools. "You look wonderful tonight." "Sasha," Nathaniel replied, his voice carefully neutral. I didn't know you were in town. Sasha Sterling. Even before Nathaniel made the introduction, Sage knew who this woman was. His ex-fiancée, the woman whose world he had been expected to inhabit, whose background matched his in every way that Sage's did not. Miss Bennet, Sasha said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I've heard so much about you. Ms. Sterling, Sage replied, accepting the handshake and noting the way the other woman's eyes assessed her with calculating precision. I hope you don't mind if I steal Nathaniel for just one dance, Sasha continued with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. For old time's sake. It was a test, Sage realized. A subtle challenge designed to see how secure she was in her relationship with Nathaniel, how willing she was to share him with his past. For a moment, every insecurity she had ever felt about belonging in his world rose to the surface. But then she felt Nathaniel's hand tighten around hers, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his expression that gave her courage. He was waiting for her response, ready to follow her lead, making it clear that the choice was entirely hers. Of course, Sage said graciously, stepping back with a smile. I'll just freshen up. As she walked away from the dance floor, she could feel eyes following her, some sympathetic, others curious to see how the drama would unfold. She made her way to the ladies' lounge with her head held high, refusing to show any sign of the turmoil churning in her stomach. The lounge was a luxurious space of marble and crystal, with comfortable seating areas and attendants ready to assist with any needs. Sage settled into one of the velvet chairs and allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. Don't let her get to you. Sage looked up to find Lucy Williams standing in the doorway, resplendent in a rose-colored gown that complemented her warm brown skin beautifully. Her best friend's presence was like a lifeline in the overwhelming sea of wealth and sophistication. Lucy. Sage stood and embraced her friend. What are you doing here? Alex Anderson invited me, Lucy said with a grin. Apparently, he wanted to make sure you had some friendly support tonight. Smart man, that one. I'm so glad you're here, Sage said, meaning every word. I was starting to feel like I was drowning. In designer gowns and handsome billionaires? What a tragedy, Lucy teased gently, but her expression grew more serious as she studied her friend's face. Talk to me. What's wrong? His ex-fiancée is here. Sasha Sterling. She's everything I'm not, elegant, sophisticated, from his world. And boring as hell, from what I've heard, Lucy said bluntly. Sage, honey, you need to look in the mirror. You're gorgeous, intelligent, kind, and strong. That man looks at you like you're the answer to every prayer he's ever said. But what if no, Lucy interrupted firmly. No what-ifs. You walked into that man's office and offered to sacrifice your freedom for your father. You stood up to his terrifying father and defended him like a lioness protecting her mate. You belong wherever you choose to be, and if some ice princess with a trust fund thinks otherwise, that's her problem, not yours. Lucy's fierce loyalty made Sage's eyes well with grateful tears. Thank you. I needed to hear that. Good. Now fix your lipstick and get back out there. Your man is probably counting the seconds until he can escape from the blonde barracuda and find you again. As if summoned by her words, Alex Anderson appeared in the doorway. Ladies, I hate to interrupt, but Nathaniel is looking for you, Sage. He seems eager to locate you. Sage quickly touched up her makeup and followed Alex back toward the ballroom, with Lucy beside her for moral support. As they approached the dance floor, she could see Nathaniel and Sasha still dancing, but even from a distance, she could tell that his attention was elsewhere. His eyes were scanning the crowd, and when he spotted her, the relief and hunger in his expression made her pulse race. The song ended, and Nathaniel immediately stepped away from Sasha, moving toward Sage with purposeful strides. When he reached her, he didn't hesitate. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly but possessively, right there in front of everyone. I missed you, he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with emotion. I was only gone 10 minutes, she laughed, but her heart was soaring. 10 minutes too long, he replied, his thumb tracing her cheekbone tenderly. From the corner of her eye, Sage could see Sasha watching them with an expression of cool displeasure, but she found that she didn't care. The man she was falling in love with had just claimed her publicly, in front of his ex-fiancée and half the city's elite. Nothing else mattered. "Dance with me again," Nathaniel said, leading her back onto the floor as a new song began. This time, there was nothing tentative about the way he held her. His arm around her waist pulled her close enough that she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest, while his other hand held hers against his shoulder. They moved together with perfect synchronization, lost in each other and the music. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I saw Sasha approach you earlier." "I'm fine," Sage assured him. "She's very beautiful." "She's very cold," Nathaniel replied bluntly. "I spent 3 years trying to convince myself I could love someone my father approved of, someone who understood the requirements of my position. It nearly destroyed me." "What changed?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to her lips before meeting her eyes again. "You did. You walked into my office and reminded me what it felt like to want to protect someone, to admire someone, to—" He trailed off, his expression becoming more intense. "To what?" she prompted softly. "To fall in love with someone," he finished, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her stumble slightly in his arms. He steadied her immediately, his grip tightening as if he were afraid she might disappear. "Nathaniel," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know our situation is complicated and that I have no right to feel this way when you're here because of a debt obligation, but she silenced him by pressing her fingers against his lips, feeling their warmth and softness beneath her touch. "It's not too soon," she said quietly. "And our situation stopped being about debt the moment you kissed me in that car." Hope flared in his eyes, bright and beautiful and desperate. "Sage, I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's crazy and impossible and probably the most foolish thing I've ever done, but I can't help it. You make me feel like I'm worth something beyond sacrifice and service. You make me feel beautiful and strong and this time," he was the one who silenced her, capturing her lips in a kiss that was deeper and more desperate than anything they had shared before. Right there on the dance floor, surrounded by hundreds of people, they kissed like they were the only two people in the world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage became aware of the attention they were attracting. Some guests were smiling indulgently at the romantic display, while others looked scandalized by such a public show of passion. "We should probably she began. "Leave," Nathaniel finished, his voice rough with desire. "We should definitely leave. Sometimes love announces itself in the most unexpected moments, on a dance floor, in front of everyone, when you finally stop fighting what your heart has known all along. Have you ever had that moment when you realized that love had crept up on you? Share your story of unexpected love in the comments below." As they made their way toward the exit, stopping to say polite goodbyes to the necessary people, Sage felt as if she were floating. The evening had been a series of tests, meeting Nathaniel's world, handling Sasha's challenge, navigating social expectations, and she had passed them all. More importantly, she had discovered that love could bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances. "Wait," she said as they reached the coat check. "What about the auction? Don't you need to stay for the final totals?" "Alex can handle it," Nathaniel replied, helping her into her wrap. "Right now, the only thing I need is to be alone with you." The intensity in his voice made her skin warm and her pulse quicken. As they waited for his car, she caught a glimpse of them in the lobby's mirrored walls. They looked like they belonged together, elegant, sophisticated, deeply in love. The reflection no longer felt like an illusion. During the drive back to the penthouse, they sat close together in the back seat, hands intertwined, neither speaking but both acutely aware of the tension building between them. The city lights blurred past the windows, but Sage was focused entirely on the man beside her. The way his thumb traced patterns across her palm, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and miraculous. "Sage," he said as they stepped into the elevator. "Yes? Tonight, when you're ready, when you want to. I want you to know that whatever happens between us, it's because we choose each other. Not because of debt or obligation or anything else. Just because we want to be together." The careful way he phrased it, giving her complete control and agency, made her fall a little deeper in love with him. She had spent so much of her life feeling trapped by circumstances, making choices based on duty and necessity rather than desire. The idea that she could choose to be with someone simply because she wanted to be with them was intoxicating. "Nathaniel," she said softly as the elevator doors opened onto his penthouse foyer. "Yes?" She turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. Through the fine fabric of his shirt, she could feel the rapid beat of his heart, matching the rhythm of her own. "I choose you," she said simply. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you make me feel like the woman I always hoped I could be." The last of his restraint seemed to snap at her words. His hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness, and when he kissed her this time, it was with all the passion and longing they had been holding back. She melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck as she gave herself over to the exquisite sensation of being cherished and desired. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their faces flushed with desire and emotion. "Are you sure?" he asked, his forehead resting against hers. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she whispered. As he led her toward the master suite, Sage felt the last of her walls crumbling. Tonight, she would give herself completely to a man who saw her as an equal, who valued her strength and intelligence and beauty. Tonight, she would discover what it meant to be loved not for what she could sacrifice, but for who she truly was. And tomorrow, they would face whatever consequences their love might bring. But tonight was theirs, and that was enough. Chapter 5. 3 weeks had passed since the charity gala, and Sage had never been happier in her life. Living with Nathaniel had revealed layers of the man she was falling deeper in love with each day. In the mornings, she would find him in the kitchen making coffee with the concentrated focus he brought to everything, his hair still mussed from sleep and his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the morning news. In the evenings, they would cook together, sharing stories of their days while jazz music played softly in the background and the city sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most, when he would find her reading on the terrace and simply sit beside her, their hands intertwined while they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. When she would wake in the middle of the night to find him watching her sleep with such tenderness that it made her heart ache with love. When they would dance in the living room to music only they could hear, lost in each other and the miracle of what they had found together. Their physical relationship had developed with the same natural intensity as their emotional connection. What had begun as stolen kisses and gentle caresses had blossomed into something deeper, more passionate. A joining of souls as much as bodies that left them both breathless and transformed. Nathaniel worshipped her with a reverence that made her feel like the most beautiful woman who had ever lived, while she gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. This morning was no different. Sage woke to the feeling of warm lips pressing gentle kisses along her shoulder blade, and she smiled before she even opened her eyes. "Good morning," Nathaniel murmured against her skin, his voice rough with sleep and contentment. She hummed, turning in his arms to face him. "What time is it?" "Early," he said, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "But I have to leave for London today, remember? The Harrington merger won't negotiate itself." The reminder hit her like cold water. She had been dreading this trip for days. 2 weeks in London while Nathaniel worked to close one of the most important deals of his career. 2 weeks apart when they had barely spent a night away from each other since the gala. "I wish I could come with you," she said, tracing patterns on his bare chest with her fingertip. "So do I. But the Harrington family is extremely traditional. Having my assistant who's also my—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Your what?" she asked softly. "My everything," he said simply, and the honesty in his voice made her heart skip. It would complicate negotiations unnecessarily. Sage understood the practical reasons, but that didn't make the separation any easier to accept. They had created their own perfect world in this penthouse, away from the pressures and judgments of the outside world. The thought of him facing those pressures alone, surrounded by people like Sasha Sterling who believed he belonged with someone from his own social class, made her stomach churn with anxiety. "I'll miss you," she whispered, pressing a soft kiss to his collarbone. "I'll miss you too," he replied, his arms tightening around her. "But it's only 2 weeks. And when I get back, we'll have something to celebrate." "What do you mean?" Nathaniel's expression grew more serious, and he shifted so he could look directly into her eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said that night at dinner with my father. About how I've built partnerships based on trust and respect rather than fear and intimidation." "What about it?" "I want to start my own company, Sage. I want to build something that reflects my values, not my father's. Ethical investments, sustainable partnerships, businesses that make the world better rather than just making rich people richer." The passion in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. This was the man she had fallen in love with, someone who wanted to use his privilege and intelligence to create positive change rather than simply accumulate wealth. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "But what about your father? What about the family business?" "I'll fulfill my current obligations, including this London deal. But after that..." He paused, his jaw tightening with determination. "After that, I'm done living my life according to Edmund Maguire's expectations." The weight of what he was saying settled over them both. Nathaniel wasn't just talking about changing jobs, he was talking about breaking free from his father's control entirely, choosing his own path regardless of the consequences. "That's a big decision," Sage said carefully. "The biggest I've ever made," he agreed. "But you've shown me what it means to fight for the people you love, to choose courage over comfort. I want to be worthy of that kind of love." Before Sage could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. They both glanced at the screen, and Edmund Maguire's name made the atmosphere in the room shift instantly. "I should take this," Nathaniel said reluctantly, reaching for the phone. "Nathaniel." Edmund's voice filled the room as Nathaniel put the call on speaker, cold and commanding as always. "I trust you're prepared for your departure this morning." "Everything is arranged, Father. The car will be here in an hour." "Excellent. The Harrington deal is crucial for our expansion into European markets. I trust you understand that failure is not an option." "I understand." "Good. And Nathaniel? I expect you to use this time in London to reconsider certain personal arrangements that may be affecting your judgment." The words hung in the air like a threat, and Sage felt ice form in her stomach. Edmund's meaning was crystal clear, he wanted Nathaniel to end their relationship while he was away. "My personal life is not up for discussion, Father," Nathaniel said, his voice carefully controlled but edged with warning. "Everything is up for discussion when it affects the family business. Sasha Sterling has been asking about you, by the way. She's in London for the season, staying with the Pemberton family. I'm sure you'll find opportunities to reconnect." The casual way Edmund delivered the information made it clear that Sasha's presence in London was no coincidence. This had been orchestrated, a carefully planned separation designed to drive a wedge between Nathaniel and Sage while surrounding him with reminders of the life his father expected him to live. "I won't be socializing during this trip," Nathaniel said firmly. "This is strictly business." "Of course. But business often requires social connections, doesn't it? The Pembertons are close friends of the Harrington family. Refusing their hospitality would be imprudent. The trap was elegant and inescapable. Nathaniel needed the Harrington deal to succeed, which meant he couldn't afford to offend their friends and allies. Edmund had maneuvered the situation perfectly, using business obligations to force his son into social situations with his ex-fiancée. "I'll handle the social requirements appropriately," Nathaniel said through gritted teeth. "I'm sure you will. Safe travels, son." The line went dead, leaving them in heavy silence. Sage could see the tension radiating through Nathaniel's body, the way his hands had clenched into fists during the conversation. "He planned this," Nathaniel said quietly, his voice tight with anger. "The timing, Sasha's presence in London, everything." "I know," Sage said softly, though her heart was breaking. "And you have to go anyway. Sage, you have to know that nothing and no one is going to change how I feel about you. Not Sasha, not my father's manipulations, not Dash." She silenced him with a gentle kiss, pouring all her love and trust into the contact. When they broke apart, she could see the desperation in his eyes, the fear that this separation might cost him everything that mattered. "I trust you," she said simply. "Whatever happens in London, whatever pressures you face, I trust you to remember what we have here." "I love you," he said fiercely, his hands cupping her face with desperate tenderness. "I love you more than I've ever loved anyone or anything in my life." "I love you too," she whispered. "Which is why I want you to go and do what you have to do. Build your father's deal, fulfill your obligations, and then come home to me so we can start building our own future." An hour later, Sage stood at the penthouse windows watching Nathaniel's car disappear into the morning traffic. The space around her suddenly felt enormous and empty, as if all the warmth and life had been drained out of it. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and tried to shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For the first few days, they talked constantly, video calls during his London mornings and her New York evenings, text messages throughout their days sharing details and observations that made them feel connected despite the distance. Nathaniel told her about the negotiations, the stuffy protocol of British business meetings, and how much he missed waking up beside her. Sage shared stories from her art therapy classes, progress on lesson plans, and how empty the penthouse felt without his presence. But by the end of the first week, something had shifted. Their calls became shorter, interrupted by business obligations and social commitments that Nathaniel mentioned with increasing reluctance. He looked tired on their video calls, stressed in a way that went beyond normal business pressure. "How are the Pembertons?" Sage asked during one of their evening conversations, noting the exhaustion in his eyes. "Fine. Traditional British hospitality. Endless dinner parties and social obligations." He rubbed his temples as if fighting a headache. "Sage, I need to tell you something." Her heart stopped. "What?" "Sasha has been persistent. She's at every function, every business dinner, every social gathering. It's obvious she's trying to rekindle something between us." "And?" The word came out smaller than she had intended. "And nothing. I've made it clear that I'm committed to someone else, that what we had is in the past." But she's not accepting that answer. Nathaniel's expression was pained. "The worst part is that everyone expects us to be together. The Harringtons, the Pembertons, even my business contacts. They keep making comments about what a perfect couple we make, how we're suited for each other." Sage felt like she was drowning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm being pressured from every direction to end things with you and marry someone from my own world. And I'm starting to understand why my father orchestrated this trip. To make you see that I don't belong in your life? To make me question whether I'm being fair to you by keeping you in it." The words hit her like a physical blow. She had expected Nathaniel to face pressure, but she hadn't expected him to start doubting their relationship because of it. "Nathaniel," she said carefully, are you questioning us? I'm questioning whether loving you means I should let you go, he said quietly. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life, Sage. Someone who doesn't come with a family legacy of destruction and obligation. Someone whose love doesn't make you a target for people like my father. That's not your choice to make, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. You don't get to decide what I deserve or what I can handle. I chose this, Nathaniel. I chose you. But maybe you shouldn't have, he said, and the pain in his voice broke her heart. Maybe I should have been strong enough to let you walk away that first day instead of creating a situation where you felt obligated to stay. Is that what you think this is? Obligation? I don't know what to think anymore, he admitted. I'm surrounded by people telling me I'm ruining your life and mine, and I'm starting to wonder if they're right. The conversation ended shortly after that, with both of them emotionally drained and more uncertain than they had been since the beginning of their relationship. Sage spent that night staring at the city lights and wondering if love was really enough to overcome the fundamental differences in their worlds. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Rose Sinclair arrived at the penthouse with her usual elegant grace, carrying a tea service and wearing the kind of knowing smile that suggested she understood far more about the situation than she was letting on. Rose, Sage said, surprised but grateful for the company. What brings you here? A little bird told me you might need some perspective, Rose said, settling herself on the terrace with the comfort of someone who had navigated many emotional storms. Lucy is worried about you. I'm fine, Sage lied, pouring tea with hands that only trembled slightly. Child, I've been around long enough to recognize heartbreak when I see it. What's troubling you? Something about Rose's gentle presence and genuine concern broke through Sage's careful composure. The whole story came pouring out, Nathaniel's trip, Edmund's manipulations, Sasha's presence in London, and Nathaniel's growing doubts about their relationship. And now he's starting to think that loving me means letting me go, Sage finished, her voice breaking on the last words. He thinks he's protecting me from his world, but really he's just protecting himself from having to fight for us. Rose was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands wrapped around her teacup as she considered Sage's words. Tell me something, dear, Rose said finally. When you walked into that young man's office to offer yourself as collateral for your father's debt, what were you fighting for? My family. My father's freedom. And when you defended Nathaniel to his father at that dinner, what were you fighting for? Him. His right to be valued for who he is rather than what others expect him to be. And now, when he's surrounded by people trying to convince him to give up the best thing that's ever happened to him, what are you going to fight for? Sage looked up at Rose with sudden understanding. Our love. Our future together. Exactly. Rose smiled with satisfaction. Love isn't passive, child. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you choose, every day, especially when choosing it is difficult. But what if he doesn't choose to fight for us? What if he decides I'm not worth the complications? Then he'll be the biggest fool who ever lived, Rose said firmly. But I don't think that's going to happen. That young man loves you with everything he has. Right now, he's scared and confused and being manipulated by people who profit from his unhappiness. But love like yours doesn't just disappear because someone tells you it's inconvenient. So what do? You remind him what he's fighting for. You show him that love isn't about accepting the limitations others place on it, it's about refusing to let anyone else define what's possible for your life. Have you ever had to fight for love when everyone around you said it was impossible? Sometimes the greatest loves require the greatest courage, the willingness to stand up and say, this matters when the world tells you to give up. Share about a time you had to choose love over convenience in the comments below. That evening, Sage made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Instead of waiting passively for Nathaniel to work through his doubts, she was going to London. She was going to fight for the man she loved and the future they had planned together. As she booked her flight and made arrangements to leave the next morning, Sage felt something she hadn't experienced since that first day in Nathaniel's office, the fierce determination that came from knowing exactly what she wanted and being willing to risk everything to get it. Nathaniel was about to learn that Sage Bennett didn't give up on love without a fight. And if Edmund Maguire and Sasha Sterling thought they could manipulate their way to victory, they were about to discover just how formidable a woman in love could be. The next morning, as her plane lifted off from JFK Airport, Sage pressed her hand against the small window and watched New York disappear beneath the clouds. By evening, she would be in London. By tomorrow, Nathaniel would understand that some loves were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. The war for their future was about to begin, and Sage Bennett was ready for battle. Chapter 6. London in November was a city wrapped in mist and golden light, its ancient streets gleaming with rain that reflected the warm glow of street lamps and shop windows. Sage had never been to Europe before, and under different circumstances, she might have been enchanted by the romantic atmosphere of the historic city. Instead, as her taxi wound through the elegant streets of Mayfair toward Nathaniel's hotel, her heart hammered with nervous determination and the terrifying possibility that she might be too late. The Langham Hotel was exactly the kind of understated luxury she had come to associate with Nathaniel's world, all crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and discreet service that whispered of old money and older traditions. As she approached the front desk with her single suitcase, Sage was acutely aware that her simple black dress and modest jewelry marked her as an outsider in this rarefied atmosphere. "I'm here to see Nathaniel Maguire," she told the impeccably dressed concierge. "I'm his assistant." The lie felt strange on her tongue, but it was technically true, and she needed access to information about his schedule. The concierge's expression remained professionally neutral as he consulted his computer. "Mr. Maguire is attending a dinner function this evening at the Pemberton residence," he said carefully. "He's not expected to return until quite late. Would you like me to leave a message?" Sage's heart sank. The Pembertons, exactly where Edmund had orchestrated for Nathaniel to be, surrounded by social pressure and Sasha Sterling's calculated charm. "Could you give me the address?" she asked. "I have urgent business documents that require his immediate attention." The concierge hesitated, clearly torn between discretion and the authority implied by her knowledge of Nathaniel's full name and business affairs. Finally, he wrote the address on a piece of hotel stationery. "It's quite an exclusive gathering," he said diplomatically. "Perhaps you might wait until tomorrow?" "Thank you for the suggestion," Sage replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But this really can't wait." An hour later, Sage stood across the street from the Pemberton townhouse in Belgravia, staring up at the Georgian mansion ablaze with warm light. Through the tall windows, she could see elegant figures moving in what was clearly a sophisticated dinner party, exactly the kind of social gathering where Nathaniel would be expected to play the role of the perfect heir, the suitable match for someone like Sasha Sterling. For a moment, her courage faltered. What was she doing here? She was a community college art teacher who had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, about to crash a party full of British aristocrats and American socialites. The rational part of her mind screamed that she was making a terrible mistake, that she should return to the hotel and wait for a more appropriate time to see Nathaniel. But then she thought of Rose Sinclair's words about fighting for love, and Lucy's fierce reminder that she belonged wherever she chose to be. She thought of Nathaniel's eyes when he told her he loved her, the way he held her like she was something precious and miraculous. She thought of the future they had planned together, the life they could build if they were brave enough to fight for it. Sage Bennett had never been one to back down from a fight, especially when someone she loved was at stake. She walked up to the imposing front door and rang the bell. A butler answered, his expression politely inquiring but clearly puzzled by her unexpected appearance. "Good evening," Sage said, summoning every ounce of confidence she possessed. "I'm here to see Nathaniel Maguire." "It's urgent." "I'm afraid Mr. Maguire is attending a private dinner party," the butler replied. "Perhaps you could return tomorrow at a more suitable hour?" "I'm his assistant," Sage said firmly. "There's been a family emergency, and I need to speak with him immediately." The mention of a family emergency seemed to shift the butler's assessment of the situation. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped aside to allow her entry. "If you'll wait here, miss, I'll inform Mr. Maguire of your arrival." Sage found herself standing in an opulent entrance hall that belonged in a museum, marble columns, oil paintings of stern ancestors, and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than her annual salary. From somewhere deeper in the house came the sound of refined conversation and gentle laughter, the kind of social atmosphere that Nathaniel had grown up navigating with ease. "Sage?" She turned to find Nathaniel standing in the doorway of what appeared to be a drawing room, his face a mixture of shock, concern, and something that might have been relief. He looked devastatingly handsome in his dinner jacket, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the weariness around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. "What are you doing here?" he asked, moving toward her with quick strides. "Is everything all right?" "Is your father Papa's fine," she assured him quickly. "Everyone's fine. I came because I needed to see you." "You flew to London because you needed to see me?" His expression shifted to something between amazement and concern. "Sage, this isn't a good time. I'm in the middle of a dinner party with the Harrington family and their associates. If they see you here let them see me," she said quietly. "I'm tired of hiding, Nathaniel. I'm tired of pretending that what we have is something to be ashamed of." Before he could respond, a woman's voice cut through the tension between them like a blade. "Nathaniel, darling, you've been away from the table for ages. We were beginning to worry." Sasha Sterling appeared in the doorway like a vision of perfect sophistication, platinum hair swept into an elegant chignon, wearing a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than Sage's car. Her smile was warm and possessive as she moved to Nathaniel's side, her hand settling on his arm with practiced familiarity. "Oh," Sasha said, her gaze moving to Sage with cool assessment. "Miss Bennet, isn't it? What a surprise to see you here." "Miss Sterling," Sage replied evenly. "I apologize for interrupting your evening." "Not at all," Sasha said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I must say, London is quite far to travel for a business consultation. Surely this could have waited until Nathaniel's return to New York?" The challenge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. A reminder that Sage was the employee, the outsider, the one who didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. "Some matters can't wait," Sage said calmly. "When something important is at stake, distance becomes irrelevant." "How dramatic," Sasha laughed, the sound like crystal bells with a sharp edge. "Though I suppose Americans do tend toward the theatrical." The casual insult was delivered with such polished cruelty that Sage felt heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could respond, Nathaniel's voice cut through the tension. "Sasha, perhaps you could return to the dinner party? I need to speak with my assistant privately." "Of course, darling," Sasha said, rising on her toes to press a kiss to Nathaniel's cheek that lingered just a moment too long to be merely friendly. "Don't be too long. Lady Pemberton is planning to serve the most divine dessert, and you know how she hates to keep her guests waiting." When Sasha disappeared back into the drawing room, Sage was left alone with Nathaniel and the weight of everything unsaid between them. The distance that had grown during their separation felt vast now, filled with doubt and pressure and the constant whisper of voices telling him that he belonged with someone else. "We need to talk," Nathaniel said quietly. "But not here. Let me make my excuses to the Pembertons, and we can go back to my hotel." "No," Sage said firmly. "I didn't fly 3,000 miles to hide in a hotel room. If you want to talk, we talk here, now." "Sage, you don't understand the position you're putting me in. These people expect I don't care what they expect," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly before she brought it back under control. "I care about what you want. What you choose. What you're willing to fight for." Nathaniel ran his hands through his hair, destroying its perfect styling, and she could see the internal battle playing out across his features. It's not that simple. The Harrington deal depends on maintaining good relationships with these families. If I offend them if you sacrifice your happiness for a business deal, what kind of life are you choosing? Sage asked softly. What kind of man does that make you? A responsible one, he said, but the word sounded hollow even to his own ears. Someone who understands his obligations. Or someone who's too afraid to disappoint his father to fight for his own future. The words hit him like a slap, and she watched as his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing the pain and confusion underneath. You think I haven't been fighting? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Do you have any idea what the last week has been like? Constant pressure from every direction, everyone telling me I'm making a mistake, that I'm throwing away everything I've worked for over an infatuation with someone who could never truly understand my world. And what do you think? Sage asked, her heart breaking at the doubt she heard in his voice. Am I just an infatuation? Someone who could never understand you? I don't know anymore, he admitted, and the honesty in his voice was devastating. I thought I knew, but being here, seeing how easily you could be hurt by this world, how much pressure my love brings into your life. Maybe they're right. Maybe caring about you means letting you go. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, Sage said fiercely. You don't get to make that decision for me, Nathaniel. You don't get to decide what I can handle or what I deserve. But what if I'm being selfish? What if keeping you means destroying any chance you have at a normal, peaceful life? What if letting me go means destroying any chance either of us has at real happiness? Before he could answer, the drawing room door opened again, and this time it wasn't just Sasha who emerged. A distinguished older woman in an elegant black gown approached them with the kind of authority that could only come from decades of social power. Nathaniel, dear, the woman said, her cut-glass accent carrying across the marble hall. I hope everything is quite all right. You've been away from our guests for some time. Lady Pemberton, Nathaniel said, his voice carefully controlled. I apologize for the disruption. This is Sage Bennett, my assistant. She's brought some urgent business matters to my attention. How dedicated, Lady Pemberton said, her gaze moving over Sage with the kind of assessment that could slice steel. Though I must say, Miss Bennett, your timing is rather unfortunate. Nathaniel has been such a delightful addition to our gathering tonight. Sasha was just telling us how perfectly suited you two have always been. The words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to wound and exclude. But instead of shrinking under the woman's disapproval, Sage felt something ignite in her chest, the same fierce protectiveness that had driven her to defend Nathaniel to his father. I'm sure Ms. Sterling has many opinions about what's suitable for Nathaniel, Sage said calmly. But I've found that the people who know him best understand that he's capable of making his own decisions about his life and his heart. How refreshing, Lady Pemberton said, her smile as cold as winter morning. Though I do hope you understand that in our circles, some decisions have consequences that extend far beyond personal preference. And I hope you understand that some people value authenticity over approval, Sage replied evenly. Real love doesn't require a committee's permission. The silence that followed was deafening. Lady Pemberton's expression had shifted from condescending amusement to outright hostility, while Nathaniel stared at Sage with something that might have been awe. Well, Lady Pemberton said finally, her voice dripping with disdain. I can see why you find her entertaining, Nathaniel. But perhaps when you've finished with your business matters, you could rejoin us? Sasha is most eager to continue your conversation about the summer season in the Hamptons. As Lady Pemberton swept back into the drawing room, Sage felt the full weight of what she had just done. She had essentially declared war on the entire social structure that governed Nathaniel's world, burned bridges she couldn't rebuild, and made enemies of people whose approval he needed for his career. You shouldn't have done that, Nathaniel said quietly, but there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, something that sounded like admiration. Yes, I should have, Sage replied firmly. I should have done it the moment I realized people were trying to convince you that loving me was a mistake. Sage no, let me finish, she interrupted, moving closer to him until they were standing just inches apart. I flew here because I realized something. Love isn't about accepting the limitations other people place on it. It's about refusing to let anyone else define what's possible for your life. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the familiar roughness of his evening shadow beneath her palms. I love you, Nathaniel. Not because you're rich or powerful or because you can give me access to a world I don't belong to. I love you because you're kind and generous and because you see me as something more than a transaction or an obligation. I love you because when I'm with you, I feel like the woman I always hoped I could be. Tears were forming in his eyes, and she could see the careful walls he had built beginning to crumble. I love you because you make me want to be better, she continued. Because you challenge me to fight for what matters, to choose courage over comfort. And if that love makes your life more complicated, if it costs you some business deals or social approval, then so be it. Some things are worth the complications they bring. Sage, he whispered, his hands coming up to cover hers. I don't need you to protect me from your world, she said softly. I need you to choose our world, the one we build together, based on love and respect and the courage to be authentic even when it's difficult. For a moment, they stood frozen in that space between heartbreak and hope, surrounded by the judgment of others but focused entirely on each other. Then Nathaniel's carefully controlled composure finally shattered entirely. I've been an idiot, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been letting other people's fears become my own, letting their limitations define what I thought was possible. We all do that sometimes, Sage said gently. The question is what we do when we realize we've been living someone else's life instead of our own. I choose you, he said fiercely, his hands tightening around hers. I choose us. I choose love over approval, authenticity over obligation. I choose the woman who flew 3,000 miles to fight for our future. When he kissed her this time, it was with all the passion and desperation of a man who had almost lost everything that mattered to him. She melted against him, pouring all her love and relief and fierce joy into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage became aware that they had an audience. Through the open doorway of the drawing room, she could see faces turned toward them, some shocked, some disapproving, others merely curious about the drama unfolding in the entrance hall. I think I may have just destroyed your business deal, she said softly. Then we'll build something better, Nathaniel replied, his voice stronger and more certain than she had heard it since his return from London. Something that doesn't require me to pretend to be someone I'm not or apologize for the woman I love. Are you sure? She asked. Because once we walk out of here together, there's no going back. These people won't forget, and they won't forgive. Good, he said firmly. I'm tired of seeking forgiveness for choosing happiness over obligation. As they walked toward the front door together, Nathaniel paused to address the room full of people who had been witness to his transformation. Lady Pemberton, he said clearly, his voice carrying across the marble hall. Thank you for your hospitality, but I'm afraid I won't be able to finish the evening. I have more important matters to attend to. Nathaniel, Sasha called from the doorway, her composed facade finally cracking to reveal desperation underneath. Don't throw away everything we could have together for a temporary infatuation. You're right, he said, turning to face her directly. I shouldn't throw away everything I could have. Which is why I'm choosing the woman who loves me for who I am, not who she thinks I should become. The butler opened the front door, and Nathaniel offered Sage his arm with old-fashioned gallantry. As they stepped out into the misty London evening, she felt as if they were stepping into an entirely new life. One built on their own terms, guided by their own values. Where are we going? She asked as they walked down the elegant street. Anywhere you want, he replied. As long as we're going together. They found a small cafe tucked away on a quiet side street, the kind of place that served tea and conversation to late-night wanderers who needed refuge from the world. Over steaming cups and shared pastries, they talked until dawn. About the pressure he had faced, the doubt she had experienced, and the love that had brought them back together despite every obstacle. "I want to know about your mother," Sage said as the first light of morning filtered through the cafe windows. "The real stories, not just the carefully edited versions you've shared before." Nathaniel's expression grew soft and vulnerable. "She would have loved you," he said quietly. "She always said that the most important thing in life was finding someone who saw your true self and chose to love it anyway." "Tell me about her garden," Sage prompted gently. And so he did, sharing memories of summer afternoons spent helping his mother tend roses and lavender while she told him stories about courage and kindness and the importance of staying true to yourself even when the world tried to make you into someone else. As he spoke, Sage could see the boy he had been. Sensitive and thoughtful, full of dreams that had been slowly crushed under the weight of expectations and obligation. "She died when I was 14, he said finally. "After that, my father decided that sentiment was a luxury we couldn't afford. He sent me to boarding school and threw himself into business, and we both learned to bury our emotions so deep that we forgot they existed. Until I walked into your office," Sage said softly. "Until you walked into my office and reminded me what it felt like to want to protect someone, to care more about their happiness than my own comfort." He reached across the small table and took her hand. "You brought me back to life, Sage. You made me remember who I wanted to be. And you made me believe I deserve to be chosen for who I am, not what I can sacrifice," she replied. "You made me feel worthy of love that doesn't require me to become smaller." As they walked back to his hotel through the awakening city, Sage felt as if everything had changed between them. The doubt and distance that had crept in during their separation had been burned away, replaced by something stronger and more certain. They had been tested by external pressure and internal fear, and they had chosen each other anyway. "What happens now?" she asked as they stood in the elevator, rising toward his suite. "Now we go home," Nathaniel said, pulling her into his arms. "And we start building the life we want instead of the one other people expect us to have." "What about the Harrington deal?" "Will probably fall through," he admitted. "Along with any future business relationships with the Pemberton Circle." "And you're all right with that?" "I'm more than all right with it," he said, his voice strong with conviction. "Because I realized something tonight. The only deal that really matters is the one I make with you. To choose love over fear, authenticity over approval, and our future together over anyone else's expectations." When the elevator doors opened onto his floor, Nathaniel swept Sage into his arms, carrying her toward his suite like a bride crossing a threshold. As he set her down gently in the elegant sitting room, she looked around at the luxury that surrounded them and realized it no longer intimidated her. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," he replied, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite tenderness. "Enough to fight for you, enough to disappoint my father, enough to build an entirely new life if that's what it takes to keep you." When he kissed her this time, it was with the passion of a man who had almost lost everything and found it again. She gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back, knowing that they had finally found their way to each other through all the obstacles and doubt. Later, as they lay tangled together in the soft hotel sheets, watching the London skyline wake up beyond the windows, Sage felt a peace she had never experienced before. They had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, their love refined by adversity into something precious and unbreakable. "What are you thinking about?" Nathaniel asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns across her bare shoulder. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," she said. "From that first day in your office to now. How we've both become who we were meant to be. And who are we meant to be? Two people brave enough to choose love over everything else," she said simply. "Two people willing to fight for a future that belongs to us alone." As the sun rose over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Sage and Nathaniel held each other close and planned the life they would build together. A life based on authenticity and courage, and the revolutionary idea that love was worth any sacrifice except the sacrifice of themselves. Chapter 7. 2 days later, Sage and Nathaniel stood hand in hand in the arrivals terminal at JFK Airport, watching New York's familiar skyline emerge through the airplane windows as they descended toward home. The city looked different somehow, not smaller, but more manageable, as if the distance and perspective had given them both a clearer view of what truly mattered in their lives. The flight back from London had been like a second honeymoon, filled with whispered plans and stolen kisses and the giddy relief of two people who had almost lost each other and found their way back. They had spent hours talking about the future they wanted to build together, Nathaniel's plans for his ethical investment company, Sage's dreams of expanding her art therapy program, and the home they would create that would be theirs alone, free from the expectations and judgments of others. But as their taxi wound through the familiar streets toward Manhattan, reality began to intrude on their euphoria. Nathaniel's phone had been buzzing constantly since they'd turned it on after landing, missed calls from his father, from business associates, from the partners at Maguire Financial who were undoubtedly dealing with the fallout from his very public rejection of the Pemberton Circle. "You should probably answer that," Sage said softly as the phone buzzed again with Edmund's name on the screen. "I will," Nathaniel replied, his hand tightening around hers. "But first, I want to go home. I want to hold you in our bed and remember what we're fighting for before I face whatever storm is waiting." The penthouse felt like a sanctuary when they finally walked through the door, filled with afternoon sunlight and the familiar sense of home. But even as they moved through the rooms that had become their shared world, both could feel the weight of the confrontation that was coming. Edmund Maguire was not a man who accepted defiance quietly, and Nathaniel's choices in London would have consequences that extended far beyond a failed business deal. They had barely set down their luggage when the private elevator chimed, announcing an unexpected visitor. Sage's heart sank as she saw Edmund Maguire emerge into the foyer, his expression cold with controlled fury and his pale blue eyes promising retribution. "Father," Nathaniel said calmly, moving to stand protectively in front of Sage. "I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly not," Edmund replied, his gaze moving between his son and the woman who had just destroyed years of careful planning. "Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. After the reports I received from London, it's obvious that Miss Bennet has quite thoroughly completed her seduction." "Edmund," Sage began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "Miss Bennet, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what you've cost my family." His voice was silk wrapped around steel, dangerous in its very civility. "The Harrington deal is dead. 3 generations of carefully cultivated relationships have been destroyed. The Pemberton family will never do business with us again, and their influence extends throughout European markets. All because your son chose love over a business arrangement," Sage said quietly. "All because he refused to pretend to be someone he's not. All because you convinced him to throw away his heritage for a temporary infatuation," Edmund snapped, his composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? The partnerships, the opportunities, the future I spent 30 years building for him?" "The future you built," Nathaniel interjected, his voice steady but edged with steel. "Not the one I wanted. Not the one that would have made me happy." "Happiness," Edmund laughed bitterly. "You sound like your mother. She filled your head with romantic nonsense about love conquering all, and look where it got her." The cruel reference to his dead wife hit Nathaniel like a physical blow, but instead of crumbling, he seemed to find strength in his anger. "Mother's love is the only thing that kept me human during all those years you tried to turn me into a copy of yourself," he said quietly. "And Sage's love is what reminded me that I don't have to choose between success and authenticity." "Authenticity doesn't pay debts," Edmund said coldly. "It doesn't build empires or secure legacies. And it certainly doesn't make up for the millions of dollars you've cost this family with your romantic gestures." Then maybe this family's priorities need to change, Sage said, stepping forward to stand beside Nathaniel. Maybe success means more than just accumulating wealth and power over others. Edmund's gaze turned to her with laser focus, and she could see the calculation behind his eyes, a predator sizing up prey and looking for weaknesses to exploit. Miss Bennet, let me be very clear about something, he said softly. You may have convinced my son to abandon his responsibilities temporarily, but this infatuation will not last. Men like Nathaniel always return to their own kind eventually. When he does, I want you to remember this conversation. Is that a threat? Nathaniel asked, his voice dangerous. It's a fact, Edmund replied. Miss Bennet, you're an intelligent woman. Surely you understand that this relationship has no future. Nathaniel needs a wife who can navigate his world, who understands the requirements of his position, who can be an asset rather than a liability. I understand that he needs someone who loves him for who he is, not who you want him to be, Sage replied calmly. Someone who supports his dreams instead of trying to cage them. Dreams, Edmund scoffed. You mean his plan to start some boutique investment firm focused on ethical partnerships? That idealistic nonsense will bankrupt him within 2 years. Then I'll be there to help him rebuild, Sage said simply. That's what love means, standing together through success and failure, supporting each other's authentic dreams even when they're difficult. How touching, Edmund said with icy sarcasm. And when the novelty wears off? When Nathaniel realizes that love doesn't pay for penthouses or private jets or the lifestyle he's accustomed to? What happens when he starts resenting the choices he made for you? The question hit closer to home than Sage wanted to admit, touching on fears she had been trying to suppress since their first night together. What if Edmund was right? What if love really wasn't enough to bridge the fundamental differences between their worlds? But then she looked at Nathaniel and saw something in his expression that gave her courage, not doubt or regret, but fierce protective love and absolute certainty. Father, Nathaniel said quietly, I need you to leave. Nathaniel now, he continued, his voice growing stronger. I need you to leave my home and stay out of my personal life. If you want to discuss business matters, we can do that at the office. But I will not allow you to stand in my home and insult the woman I love. Edmund's mask of civilized control finally slipped entirely, revealing the cold fury beneath. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, Nathaniel replied firmly. The biggest mistake of my life would be letting you convince me to give up the only real happiness I've ever known for the sake of preserving a legacy built on other people's misery. You'll regret this decision, Edmund said, moving toward the elevator. Both of you. When the money runs out and the novelty fades, you'll understand what you've thrown away. The only thing I regret, Nathaniel called after him, is that it took me this long to find the courage to choose love over fear. After Edmund's departure, the penthouse fell into heavy silence. Sage moved to the windows overlooking the city, her mind racing with everything that had just transpired. The war for their future had begun in earnest, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Edmund's threats were more than just empty intimidation. He's not going to give up, she said quietly. I know, Nathaniel replied, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. But it doesn't matter. Whatever he tries to do, we'll face it together. What if he's right about some things? Sage asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her heart. What if your idealistic investment firm really does fail? What if choosing love over legacy really does cost you everything you've worked for? Nathaniel turned her in his arms so he could look directly into her eyes, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite tenderness. Then we'll build something new, he said simply. Sage, do you know what I've learned in the past few weeks? Everything I thought I had worked for, the money, the respect, the family legacy, none of it meant anything without someone to share it with. Without love, success is just an empty trophy that doesn't keep you warm at night or make you laugh when you're tired or hold you when you're scared. But what if no more what ifs, he interrupted gently. No more letting other people's fears become our own. I love you, Sage Bennett. I choose you over every fortune, every family approval, every business deal in the world. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose me too, knowing that our life together might be more challenging than either of us expects. Looking into his eyes, Sage saw the same courage that had driven her to walk into his office that first day and offer herself as collateral for her father's debt. She saw the same determination that had brought her to London to fight for their love. Most importantly, she saw the same unwavering commitment that had sustained them through every obstacle they had faced. I choose you, she said firmly. I choose us. I choose love over security, authenticity over approval, and our future together over anyone else's definition of what's possible. When he kissed her this time, it was with the passion of a man claiming his future, and she responded with all the love and certainty in her heart. This was their moment of complete surrender to each other, their final rejection of the limitations others had tried to place on their love. 3 months later, Sage stood in the exact same spot where she had first offered herself as collateral for her father's debt, but everything had changed. The office was different now, warmer, more personal, with artwork from her students covering one wall and plants bringing life to the sterile corporate space. Instead of Maguire financial letterhead, the desk now bore the logo of Meridian Partners, the ethical investment firm that Nathaniel had launched with backing from investors who shared his vision of business as a force for positive change. The Patterson Foundation wants to increase their investment in the education initiative, Alex Anderson reported, entering the office with a stack of files and a grin that spoke of successful negotiations. Apparently, our returns are exceeding their expectations while actually helping communities. Revolutionary concept. Shocking that treating people with dignity and respect might be good for business, Nathaniel replied with dry humor, looking up from the proposal he was reviewing. The stress lines that had once marked his face had been replaced by laugh lines, and his eyes held a contentment that Sage had never seen during his Maguire financial days. How's the community center expansion coming along? Alex asked, turning to Sage with genuine interest. Better than we hoped, Sage replied, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. We'll be able to serve 3 times as many children, and the art therapy program will include family counseling and job training for parents dealing with addiction issues. The project had become deeply personal for all of them, especially after Thomas Bennett had completed his successful rehabilitation program and begun working as a peer counselor for other families affected by gambling addiction. Sage's father had found purpose in helping others avoid the mistakes that had nearly destroyed his family, and his relationship with his daughter had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Speaking of the community center, Nathaniel said, rising from his desk with something that looked suspiciously like nervous excitement, I have something I want to show you. He led Sage through the office toward a door she had never seen opened, using a key to reveal a space that took her breath away. It was an art studio, flooded with natural light from skylights and equipped with everything an art therapy program could need. Easels, paints, clay, and comfortable seating areas for both individual and group work. Nathaniel, she breathed, moving through the space with wonder. When did you do this? I've been working on it for weeks, he said, watching her reaction with obvious pleasure. I thought maybe you'd like to expand your program here too. Corporate art therapy for executives who've forgotten how to express emotions, stress relief for employees, team building through creativity. It's perfect, she said, turning to face him with tears of joy in her eyes. It's absolutely perfect. There's one more thing, he said, his voice taking on a quality that made her pulse quicken. This studio has another purpose too. He moved to a small easel in the corner, covered with a cloth that he removed with ceremony. Underneath was a painting, clearly the work of someone with more enthusiasm than skill, but every brushstroke filled with love and intention. It showed 2 figures standing together against a city skyline, their hands intertwined, their faces turned toward a sunrise that painted the world in shades of gold and hope. I painted it myself, he said, suddenly sounding uncertain. I know it's not very good, but I wanted to create something with my own hands for once, something that represented what you've given me." Sage moved closer to study the painting, seeing in its imperfect beauty all the love and effort he had poured into creating something meaningful. But it was the small card attached to the bottom of the easel that made her heart stop entirely. In Nathaniel's careful handwriting were the words, "Will you marry me?" She turned to find him on one knee behind her, holding a ring that caught the light streaming through the skylights. But it wasn't an ostentatious diamond designed to impress others. It was a simple, elegant band with a stone that seemed to hold all the colors of the sunset they had watched together from his terrace. "Sage Bennett," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you walked into my life and taught me what it means to choose love over fear, authenticity over approval, courage over comfort. You've made me the man I always wanted to be but never had the strength to become. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me based on love and dreams and the revolutionary idea that happiness matters more than anyone else's expectations?" Through her tears of joy, Sage could see their entire future spread out before them, not the life of wealth and privilege that others might expect, but something infinitely more valuable. A life built on mutual respect and shared dreams, filled with the kind of love that made everything else possible. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll build any life with you, face any challenge, weather any storm, as long as we're together." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her with all the passion and promise of their shared future, Sage felt the last piece of her transformation click into place. She was no longer the woman who had offered herself as collateral for her father's debt. She was a woman who had fought for love and won, who had chosen authenticity over approval and found a partner who valued her for exactly who she was. 6 months later, they were married in the community center where Sage taught her classes, surrounded by family and friends who had supported their love through every challenge. Lucy Williams served as maid of honor, beaming with pride for her best friend's happiness. Alex Anderson stood as Nathaniel's best man, having become not just an employee but a brother chosen by love rather than blood. Thomas Bennett walked his daughter down the aisle with tears of joy in his eyes, grateful for the second chance at happiness that his daughter's courage had made possible. Even Rose Sinclair was there, elegant and radiant in lavender silk, her knowing smile suggesting that she had always believed this day would come. Edmund Maguire was notably absent, having maintained his cold distance since that confrontation in the penthouse. But his absence no longer had the power to wound Nathaniel, who had found a family built on love and choice rather than obligation and expectation. As they exchanged vows in front of walls covered with artwork created by the children Sage worked with, both felt the profound rightness of building their future in a place dedicated to healing and growth. They promised to love each other through success and failure, to support each other's dreams even when they seemed impossible, and to choose courage over comfort for all the days of their lives. The deeper intimate connection came that night, not in a luxury hotel or exotic destination, but in the cabin retreat they had chosen for their honeymoon, a simple place surrounded by mountains and forests where they could be completely alone with each other and the love they had built together. In the soft light of the fireplace, with rain drumming gently against the windows like nature's blessing on their union, they came together with a passion that represented the complete healing of all their wounds. Nathaniel worshipped Sage with a reverence that made her feel like the most precious thing in his universe, while she gave herself to him with a trust and openness that reflected the complete safety she felt in his love. Their physical intimacy mirrored their emotional journey from resistance to complete openness, from fear to absolute trust. In the warm circle of firelight, surrounded by the peace of the natural world, they discovered what it meant to be completely known and completely loved, scars and all. "I love you, Mrs. Maguire," Nathaniel whispered against her skin as they lay tangled together afterward, their hearts beating in synchronized rhythm. "I love you too, Mr. Maguire," she replied, tracing patterns on his chest with fingers that bore his ring. "Thank you for seeing who I really was before I had the courage to see it myself. Thank you for refusing to let me settle for anything less than authentic love," he replied, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for fighting for us when I was too scared to fight for myself." Outside, The storm that had threatened all day finally broke, but inside their sanctuary, they were safe and warm and completely at peace. They had weathered the real storms already, the challenges and pressures and doubt that had threatened to tear them apart. What remained was the quiet joy of building a life together, day by day, choice by choice, love by love. As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, both knew that their story was just beginning. There would be other challenges ahead, other moments when they would need to choose love over fear, authenticity over approval. But they would face those challenges together, armed with the knowledge that some loves are strong enough to transform not just the people who share them, but the entire world they choose to build. Their love had begun with a debt that seemed impossible to repay, but it had blossomed into something infinitely more valuable, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and the revolutionary understanding that real wealth is measured not in dollars or status, but in the depth of connection between two souls who have chosen to see and love each other completely. The woman who had once offered herself as collateral had become a wife, a partner, and a force for positive change in the world. The man who had once been trapped by family expectations had become a husband, an ethical business leader, and someone who chose love over legacy every single day. Together, they had proven that some debts can only be paid with a lifetime. Not because they destroy you, but because they create something so beautiful that a lifetime of gratitude isn't nearly long enough to express what you owe to the love that saved you. Chapter 8. 6 months after their wedding, Sage and Nathaniel stood together in the same community center where they had exchanged vows, but this time they were surrounded by a celebration of a different kind. The walls were covered with artwork created by the children in Sage's expanded program. Vibrant paintings and sculptures that told stories of healing, hope, and the transformative power of creative expression. Tonight was the opening of the new wing that Meridian Partners had funded, a space that would serve 3 times as many families affected by addiction, trauma, and financial hardship. But more than that, it represented something revolutionary, a business model that measured success not just in profit margins, but in lives changed and communities strengthened. Mrs. Maguire, said Maria Santos, one of Sage's former students who was now studying to become an art therapist herself. I wanted to thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Sage embraced the young woman warmly, remembering the scared 12-year-old who had first walked into her classroom 3 years ago, angry and withdrawn after her father's incarceration. Now Maria was a confident young adult with plans to return to the community center as a professional, creating a cycle of healing that would touch countless other lives. You did the hard work, Sage replied. I just provided the paintbrushes. And the hope, Maria added softly. You showed me that my story didn't have to end with my circumstances. That I could choose to write a different ending. As Maria moved away to mingle with other guests, Nathaniel appeared at Sage's side, his hand finding hers with the automatic ease of a man who had spent months learning to express love through simple touches. Proud of what you've built here? He asked, his voice warm with admiration. Proud of what we've built, she corrected, squeezing his fingers. This wouldn't exist without your willingness to redefine what success looks like. Across the room, they could see Thomas Bennett in animated conversation with a group of parents, sharing his story of recovery and the resources that had helped him rebuild his relationship with his daughter. His transformation had been as dramatic as anyone's, from a man consumed by shame and addiction to someone who had found purpose in helping others navigate their own journeys toward healing. Papa looks happy, Sage observed, watching her father laugh at something one of the other parents had said. He looks proud, Nathaniel agreed. And he should be. His daughter didn't just save him, she showed him how to save himself and others in the process. Lucy Williams approached them, resplendent in a royal blue dress and wearing the kind of smile that suggested she had news to share. Alex finally asked me to marry him, she announced without preamble, holding up her hand to display a ring that was beautiful in its simplicity. Lucy. Sage squealed, embracing her best friend with joy. When? How? Tell me everything. Last night, at the restaurant where we had our first date, Lucy said, her eyes sparkling with happiness. He said watching you and Nathaniel fight for your love taught him that some things are worth taking risks for. Alex always was a smart man, Nathaniel said, clapping his friend on the shoulder as Alex joined their little group. Though it took him long enough to realize what he had. Some of us need more time to work up the courage, Alex replied with a grin. But seeing what you two have built together, it made me want to stop playing it safe and start living fully. As they celebrated Lucy and Alex's engagement, Sage felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal happiness. Their love story had become something larger, a catalyst that inspired others to choose courage over comfort, authenticity over approval. The ripple effects of their decision to fight for each other continued to spread outward, touching lives they might never know about. Rose Sinclair appeared beside them with her usual elegant grace, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of a mentor who had watched her guidance bear fruit. "My dear girl," she said to Sage, "do you remember what I told you that day in the penthouse? About love being something you choose, especially when choosing it is difficult?" "I remember," Sage replied. "That conversation changed everything for me." "Good," Rose smiled. "Because I have a feeling your story is inspiring others to make the same choice." The ripples of authentic love spread farther than we ever imagine. As if summoned by her words, a young couple approached them hesitantly. The woman was clearly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly, while the man beside her wore the carefully controlled expression of someone trying to project confidence while battling internal fear. "Excuse me," the woman said nervously. "Are you Sage and Nathaniel Maguire?" "We are," Sage replied gently, immediately recognizing the look of people who were facing their own impossible situation. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, and this is my husband David," the woman continued. "We read about your story in the Business Journal, about how you started Meridian Partners and the community center expansion. We were wondering, we're in a difficult situation, and we didn't know where else to turn." Over the next few minutes, their story emerged, a young family drowning in medical debt from complications during Jennifer's pregnancy, facing the loss of their home and David's small business. Traditional lenders had turned them away, and they were desperate for alternatives. "We're not asking for charity," David said with quiet dignity. "We're asking for a chance. A loan with reasonable terms, someone who sees us as people rather than just credit scores and risk assessments." Nathaniel and Sage exchanged a look that communicated volumes. This was exactly why they had built Meridian Partners, to provide ethical alternatives for families caught in impossible circumstances, to prove that business could be both profitable and compassionate. "Let's set up a meeting next week," Nathaniel said, pulling out his business card. "Bring your business plan and financial statements. We specialize in seeing potential where others see problems." As the young couple walked away with hope in their eyes and Nathaniel's card clutched in their hands, Sage felt the profound rightness of the life they had chosen. They weren't just making money, they were making a difference, one family at a time. The evening wound down with speeches from community leaders, testimonials from families who had been helped by the programs, and a presentation of the stunning mural that the children had created together, a tapestry of handprints in every color of the rainbow, surrounding words that read, "Every ending is a new beginning when we choose love." As the last guests departed and they helped clean up the community center that had become such an important part of their lives, Sage found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Less than 2 years ago, she had walked into Nathaniel's office believing that love required sacrifice, that protecting others meant diminishing herself. Now she understood that real love didn't make you smaller, it helped you become everything you were meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Nathaniel asked as they stood together in the empty art room, surrounded by the evidence of so many transformed lives. "I'm thinking about that woman who walked into your office to offer herself as collateral," Sage said softly. "She thought love meant giving up everything for others. She didn't understand that the greatest gift you can give someone is becoming the fullest, most authentic version of yourself." "And what do you think now?" "I think love is about seeing someone's potential and helping them grow into it," she replied. "It's about choosing to build something beautiful together, even when the world tells you it's impossible. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, his hands coming up to frame her face with the tenderness that never failed to make her heart skip. "You know what I love most about our story?" he said. "What?" "It's not a fairy tale where everything magically works out. It's a real story about two imperfect people who chose to fight for something better, who learned that love isn't about finding someone who completes you, it's about becoming complete enough in yourself that you can choose to share your wholeness with someone else." "And the moral of our story?" Sage asked with a smile. "That some debts can only be paid with a lifetime. Not because they destroy you, but because they create something so beautiful that a lifetime of gratitude isn't nearly enough." As they turned off the lights and locked up the community center, preparing to head home to the life they had built together, Sage felt a peace that went deeper than contentment. They had proven that love could triumph over every obstacle, that authenticity was stronger than approval, and that two people brave enough to choose each other could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond their own happiness. Their story had begun with a debt that seemed impossible to repay, but it had become something infinitely more valuable. Proof that real wealth isn't measured in dollars or status symbols, but in the depth of connection between two souls who have chosen to see and love each other completely. In the end, the greatest collateral Sage had offered wasn't her freedom or her future, it was her willingness to believe that she deserved a love that made her stronger rather than smaller, a partnership that celebrated her authenticity rather than demanding she become someone else. And the greatest return on Nathaniel's investment wasn't monetary profit or social status, it was the discovery that a life built on love and integrity was infinitely more satisfying than one built on obligation and fear. Together, they had learned that love isn't about accepting the limitations others place on it, it's about refusing to let anyone else define what's possible for your life. It's about choosing courage over comfort, authenticity over approval, and the radical belief that two people who truly see each other can create something beautiful enough to change the world. What barriers have you overcome to find authentic love? Have you ever discovered that your greatest challenge led to your greatest blessing? Share your story of transformation in the comments below. Your journey might inspire someone else to choose courage over comfort. Thank you for joining Sage and Nathaniel's passionate journey from obligation to authentic love. If their story touched your heart, show some love with a like and subscribe for more stories about souls finding their way to each other against all odds.